Company of Heroes 2nd edition is World War II in a box. With sprawling battlefields, fantastic minis, and a great combination of strategic and tactical play, it's going to keep hitting my tabletop for years to come. In this video, I shall give you a few hints and tips that can help you to avoid some of the mistakes of a rookie general and ensure that your troops have the best chance of seizing victory. My first piece of advice to new players is to make sure that you clearly understand the game's turn order. When you first start playing, follow the guide carefully through each of the steps in the different phases. This might sound obvious, but it's only by really absorbing the flow of the game that you'll know how best to position your machine guns, when to launch assaults, or when to declare retreats, or all the other clever little tactical tweaks that will get the best out of your forces and allow you to capture and hold control points. The second thing is to not underestimate the importance of the supply phase. When a game has this much board presence, it's easy to think of it as a regular war game. A sort of pimped up Memoir 44, for example, but it's a lot more than that. The supply phase is when you plan your strategy, responding to the board state and to what your opponent is doing. This is the part of the game that really makes it feel like an RTS. It's a chance to think ahead. What will I need a few turns from now? If I invest in such and such a unit, how can I get it where it needs to be before the battle finishes? The game can be won or lost in the supply phase just as much as it can on the board itself. And speaking of planning ahead, you need to think carefully about activation order because it switches between rounds. That means that the person who acts last in one round will act first in the next. If you're using the fixed 12 command points, as in the basic version of the game, that allows you to launch a sudden rush forward by activating a unit last in one round and then first in the next. If you're using the operations deck, this can also be an effective tactic. When you're first player, you'll know when you're down to your last turn, but your opponent won't. This will give you a distinct advantage when it comes to timing that moment to surge forward and seize control of an objective. Company of Heroes allows you to apply a number of really interesting upgrades to your units, but one that I've already fallen in love with is speed. A speed dice gives a unit a free move each round. Early in the game, this can be incredibly useful for moving your forces up the board and claiming control points. This can help you to seize the initiative and give an early boost to your income, forcing your opponent to play catch-up. In the mid to late game, speed dice can be the difference between your units languishing in your deployment area or getting forward and managing to get stuck into the fighting. At this point, it's also worth mentioning transport vehicles, which often start with the speed ability. Some of them, though, can be upgraded to have it twice. And transports in this game really do what they ought to, which is to move your troops around the board much faster than they could ever hope to match on their own. In the mid to late game, you need your transports to have delivered the first wave of infantry and then return to the deployment area, ready to pick up reinforcements and then rush them forward into the fray. Another fantastic upgrade is Flame, which guarantees damage against any unit that isn't a heavy vehicle. So no saving throws, no resistance, just damage. And this can be great when your opponent has a unit that's dug in like an Alabama tick. A great example of this is where your opponent has claimed a control point and then moves some infantry into a building from where they can threaten any of your troops that try to claim this. With these troops benefiting from 3 cover dice, you're going to have to expend a lot of time and resources to try and dig them out. Certainly a lot more than just this one unit of infantry. Unless, that is, you have the Flame upgrade. That allows you to ignore the cover dice completely, and you could conceivably place this small unit of infantry here, benefiting from heavy cover, and they now have a more advantageous position than the infantry inside the building. The key here is once again to plan ahead. If you can see a control point right next to a building, then something like this is quite likely to occur. So get yourself the Flame upgrade as soon as you can, and you'll be ready to deal with this sort of situation. I also urge new players not to overlook the value of field defences, which can be built by any unit with the wrench ability. Without cover, infantry have no saving throw against anti-infantry damage, and if you don't look after them, they will die really quickly. Some humble sandbags will give them cover from two directions. And because these cover saves are successful 2/3 of the time, they really do make a huge difference. So spending one command point to build those sandbags is usually a really worthwhile activity. It will greatly increase the life expectancy of your infantry and force your opponent to dedicate more of his forces if he wants to deal with your troops. In the full game, you also have barbed wire and tank traps, which prevent infantry and vehicles, respectively, from entering a hex. These are great for control points near your own deployment area that you want to seize early on in the game. After that, though, you'll want to advance your forces further onto the board. If you spend a command point, you can dig in some barbed wire, leaving that behind and making it much more difficult for your enemy to sneak around the flanks and steal the control point from you. Tank traps achieve the same with those pesky tier 1 vehicles that often have the capture ability. In Company of Heroes, you're always trying to strike a balance between advancing rapidly to seize objectives and then holding on to those objectives as your opponent tries to take them away. Mastering the two things I've just talked about, speed upgrades and field defences, is crucial if you want to achieve that. Despite your best laid plans, there will be times when you need to retreat. And understanding how this works, when to save a depleted unit, or when to stand your ground so as to stall the capture of a control point, is vital. Infantry can retreat at any point during your manoeuvre phase, regardless of how many CPs they've spent. And if they're doomed to die in the next damage phase and they aren't holding on to any useful terrain, then this is often the best option. More than this though, the ability to retreat can provide you with a really interesting tactic. You can advance infantry well into your opponent's area, threatening their forces with the intention of pulling them back at the end of the manoeuvre phase. In fact, you can wait and see how your opponent responds to your forces. Maybe they don't do anything and you decide to leave them there, or if they shuffle their forces around, then you can pull them back without them taking too much damage. This sort of feint is a really clever way to keep your opponent guessing and do something unpredictable. My final piece of advice is a very practical one. The game uses lots of dice, very cleverly I think, but there are times where there will certainly be lots of them on a table. So find a way that works for you to clearly distinguish between upgrade dice and dice that have been assigned for damage. I'm fairly careful with this sort of thing, but have still been left scratching my head from time to time as to which is which. So keep an eye on the dice and everything should run smoothly. There's loads more to discover with Company of Heroes, but hopefully this little boot camp has given you a few useful tips and will ensure that you'll soon be raising your flag over those control points. I'd love to hear how you guys are getting on with Company of Heroes. Are there any particular armies that you're enjoying playing, or any nice tactics and combos that have helped you to secure victory? Please let me know in the comments. I hope that you've enjoyed the video. If so, please consider giving it a like or subscribe. I hope to see you again soon. And until then, keep rolling.